Hello, everybody. You might know me best as the author of Penetration Testing, a hands-on introduction to hacking. Yes, the new edition is coming out, possibly by DEF CON. I also have done a lot of research in mobile, including I had a DARPA Cyber Fast Track grant. I've done a couple startups at this point. My research has moved somewhat into AI. I think a lot of us have. I'm just all-around pen tester, researcher, been a CISO for a hedge fund, done the blue team side of things. I do the kind of work I can get, and I can figure out how to do. And I have squishies, because otherwise I will do this. So this is slightly less distracting, right? Okay. Anyhow, so we're going to talk about mobility in life today. I also love to go off on tangents, so I will try to stay on track as best I can. But I do want to tell one story. Okay, so I've been to the UK a few times in my life, never really had any trouble getting here. I was coming from Norway, because I did B-Sides Kristiansand. I get to the airport, and they tell me I can't come to the UK because I don't have a ETA, which I didn't know you had to have, but apparently you have to have. You all who live here probably have no idea that, you used to not have a visa to get here, now you do. So I asked the lady, how long is it going to take me to get it? She's like, about 3 weeks. And I'm like, my talk's tomorrow. But never, and then she doesn't want to even give me my ticket to Copenhagen, but I'm like, I'm in the EU. I can go to Copenhagen, big old, hub, and deal with it from there. But no, so she gives me the ticket to Copenhagen, I download the app, I apply, and go through security, and by the time I get to the gate, it's approved, and I'm here. So the moral of the story is actually look up what the current entry requirements are for the places you're going. There was this little thing called Brexit that I assume maybe had something to do with it, because otherwise it'd still be part of the EU, right? But yeah, that's my funny story about how I almost didn't make it here, but I did. Alright, so let's talk about mobility. This doesn't look much like mobility. However, this is what a lot of IT and security people think of when they think of what they are charged with protecting. This is actually an old Cisco diagram of a network. So we think that we have access to everything. We think that everything is going to be on the network. We're probably going to have domain. I'm already starting to walk. Microphone's right there. But we have access to everything on the network. We probably have domain admin access. We have the ability to see all the traffic going between all of these systems on our network. We also have the ability to see and inspect everything that is leaving the perimeter and entering the perimeter. So we have a lot of control, security-wise, of our enterprise. Unfortunately, that has long since not been the case of what we're actually dealing with when we're trying to secure our enterprise networks. The perimeter has moved, not just around mobility. Mobility is certainly part of it, and a large part of it, given the title of this talk, but we have moved the perimeter in many different ways. People work from home. Now instead of what is on our network at work, which is a problem that a lot of people don't know the answer to. I have seen many instances of boxes that people didn't know about being under the floor somewhere on some of my pen tests. You might remember Equifax, getting hacked. Big news story. That they had Apache struts facing the internet. But what was interesting about it is those weren't the only Apache struts instances they had. Some of them they did patch. So it was really an inventory management problem. So inventory management has always been a problem. But now we have to deal with what is the security of the internet-connected refrigerator in our remote worker's home? What is the security posture of the laptop that their child's school sent home with them? All of these things that might be on the network at home are now part of the security posture of our organization. We certainly moved to, we've got SaaS for everything, we've got apps for everything, unless you're like IBM or one of the like gigantic contractors who build everything in-house or buy everything in-house. Chances are you're not going to, say, do timesheets or have Salesforce on here, email, Google Drive, Microsoft Drive, what have you. You're not going to do all that in-house. You're going to buy some sort of subscription service, and you're going to hook up to it. You're probably going to put some of your private secret data on those systems, and now the security posture of those services is now part of your organization as well. And of course, the mobile device itself, we've now got workers there's different ways to do it, of course. Bring your own device, personally owned, corporate owned, personally enabled, or, the grand old, I don't have 2 phones in my pocket, one of them's down there, but having a corporate phone and then a personal phone. But in many cases, we have employees who have access to much of their work data on a device that they own that we, to an extent, can manage through things like enterprise mobility management, mobile threat defense, Gartner Magic Quadrants for mobility. But at the end of the day, the administrator of that device is the user. And now, of course, we're bringing AI assistants into it. So, so one of our employees needs to update this super secret document that we have that has lots of super secret data in it. They waited until the last minute. They actually haven't even read it yet. What do? They pop it into ChatGPT and ask it, what do I need to do to change this to make it look like I worked really hard on it? Suddenly, we have all of that data going into the back end. Of course, you can build your own, you can just set up Llama and then not have it go to the cloud, but that employee's not doing that. So the perimeter has moved. This idea that we had of this perimeter where we could see all the data going in and out is gone. Now we have so many perimeters, we could play whack-a-mole with them. You guys have that game, right? Where the alligators come out and you hit them. That's basically what we're playing with our perimeter nowadays. And mobile security today, certainly, the thing is, mobile is a pretty secure system, Android included. Android always got beaten up for being the insecure one. There's lots of malicious apps in their Play Store. They're easier to hack than the iPhone, but, nowadays, you have to look where the money is, right? For a full attack chain all the way to persistence, from remote to persistence on Android, that's going to get you on the black market or in the bug bounty program around the same amount as, the NSO group is getting for iPhone. So, mobility, and that is part of the problem we have in securing it, is that it is built with security in mind, and a lot of the security tools that we have used for all these years were built on very open platforms. I like to use the example of antivirus, right? Everybody picks on antivirus. But what antivirus does, it does well. Does it get your, nation-state advanced persistent threat things? Absolutely not. Does it catch your mom downloaded something weird off of Facebook to play a game that's actually a virus? Absolutely yes. When antivirus was first introduced to mobility, it was in a state such that there was enough security in mobility that apps lived in their own sandbox. They could see very specific things about the operating system, but as far as they could tell, they were the only app on the phone. So a mobile antivirus app would wake up periodically, ask itself, am I a virus? And then go back to sleep. Things have changed. APIs have been put out by Google and Apple to allow security programs to have more access to things so we can actually gain more insight into, am I personally a virus? But we still do struggle with the security of the device fighting against us as security people. So, yeah. But we also, I mean, as I mentioned, we are logged in to things like, we've got our work SharePoint. We might even be VPN directly into work. And depending on how your work is set up and depending on how things are segmented at work, you may actually have direct access from the phone to some internal systems with, some very sensitive things on there. And if that phone is compromised, it may be able to start attacking those other boxes. Of course, that's also where we keep many of us, we might have YubiKeys. There's going to be an exception to everything I say. Let's just say that. And because we've got 30 minutes, let's just assume the exceptions exist. And you guys can call me out for it later. But for most of us, our multi-factor authentication lives on our phone. If somebody compromises our device at the root level, a multi-factor does not live in the secure enclave. It lives at the app level. So, in a lot of cases, you can, especially when they're just sending the text message for the two-factor, a attacker who has persistent access to the phone is often going to be able to use that to bypass two-factor. So, we've got everything in our entire lives on that phone, including a lot of things that may be corporate related, and attackers know that. For a long time when I was doing mobile research early on, people were like, Jordan, why do you talk about all these attacks? Yes, you go up there and you show that you can go from a phone to a computer and steal all their stuff. But is it really happening in the real world? The Verizon threat report doesn't say anything about this, so it obviously isn't happening. Of course, for one thing, we didn't have any detection about it. You actually have to have detection rules to see whether these attacks are happening, to see whether, it's actually going on. So that was part of the problem. And, obviously we've seen, things like, you've probably seen like NSO Group and their Pegasus tool. We're obviously seeing that these attacks are happening now. The attackers go where the money is. When I started doing this, attackers who were going after browsers, they put most of their focus on Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer had plenty of vulnerabilities, believe me, but so did Firefox, Chrome, everybody else in the space. But Internet Explorer had more users than anybody else. So if your goal is to get the mode, if you're not targeting a specific person, you're just trying to get as many as you can compromised, you're going to go after the ones where they have the most users. Now, the attackers are focusing more and more on the phones because more and more people are using phones instead of traditional computers at all. I'd say this might be the last traditional computer I ever owned. Mobile devices are meant to be connected. They were, after all, designed to be phones. Now they are everything. But the idea behind them is connectivity. Many years ago, Christian Pageant did a talk at DEF CON showing, that you can mess with the cell towers, basically get any phone in the room to connect to a cell tower that was on stage. That attack all these years later still works. All that does, which most attacks are very simple if you really think about them, even as cool as they are. And I think that talk is very, very cool and still reference it in my talk today. But all it did was jam all the cell towers. So it jammed all your phones back to 2G. 2G is still out there. Edge. It's actually the most widely, out there, network there is. You can't do very much with it. Don't try to surf the internet much with it because it's slow. But it also doesn't do any authentication. But your latest devices, if they cannot find 5G, 4G, so on and so forth, if they cannot find anything else, they will drop back to Edge even today. And it does no authentication. So I can just put up a cell tower, get a little jammer, and I can make that attack happen today. And, that's just from the mobile carrier side. We've also got, the Bluetooth, near field communication, all the other Wi-Fi, of course. You're probably connected to the Wi-Fi here in this building. It's always a thing. If you would attach to the Wi-Fi at a HackerCon, who else is on there? The mobile devices can, of course, be stolen themselves. people download malicious applications or spyware applications onto them. They install configuration profiles. What's interesting to me is the way that an attacker would convince you to install, say, a malicious application on your iPhone follows the exact same course of steps of you enrolling your device in your corporate workplace. You would install a profile that would then allow it to use apps that are not signed by Apple. Well, now they're signed by that profile. And that's exactly how you enroll in a new workspace. That helps you get your VPN, your mail, run any corporate apps. But that's also exactly how they get you to install malware. And of course, we also have phishing is alive and well. Even on email, we're still clicking on them. But mobility gives us a plethora of new ways we can be phished. Any way that we can give somebody a link. I've seen QR codes all around this place. Has anybody replaced any of the QR codes with something nasty yet? This happens at DEF CON every year. There's a QR code. It's supposed to tell you, like, a map of where to go next. You open it. It's something your eyes will never unsee. It happens, but it could also be something malicious. It could say, download this app for this restaurant, and next time you go there, you'll get a coupon for £5 off. And you install the app. It looks like the app. It works like the app. It actually is the app. It just has a little something extra included. And this happens all the time. We have malicious apps in the actual Play Store. In fact, a lot of the permissions that our apps use are actually called dangerous in the documentation. Things like using the internet or the camera. They could be dangerous, or they could be perfectly normal. If I'm a Fitbit type tracking app and I check your GPS location and I upload it to some server in China periodically, that seems perfectly normal. If I am a flashlight app, suddenly that looks like something that might need additional input. So it's very difficult to tell what apps are malicious and what are not programmatically much of the time for reasons like that. And as I alluded to earlier, part of the problem is that mobility has been built with security in mind, which that's what they tell us to do, secure development life cycle. Do not just pin the security on at the end. Build it from the beginning. Of course, this was not always true. I always like to tell the story of the earliest versions of the iOS. Up until iOS 4.0, the browser ran as root, which browsers should never run as root because they talk to the internet. And the internet is a scary place with lots of exploits on it. So the browser should absolutely never run as root. So, jailbreaking the very earliest iPhone was quite easy. But we have since wised up. I would say that the mobile devices, and I include Android in this, Android and iOS, are some of the most secure devices that you will interact with usually. I mean, some of you may have, jobs where you work in air-gap networks and whatnot. Again, there's always going to be an exception. But in general, the devices are built with security in mind at every layer. From the hardware to the firmware to the operating system itself, the applications. I mentioned that sandboxing that stopped early antivirus from working, to your whole device being built with security in mind. And that, again, made a lot of the assumptions that, which we've seen, the computers move in that direction too. Now when my computer, it'll ask me, do you want this app to have access to your downloads folder? It didn't used to do that. It learned that from mobility. It learned that from mobile permissions. So, we had things like the application sandbox that are now moving over to our traditional devices. But we are absolutely, it's containing us as security people trying to build security programs for mobility. The fact that it already has security built in. Apple and Google and Samsung and all them want us to rely on them for the security, but we, as the enterprise, and we as the security people want to rely on ourselves, but it doesn't want to let us. I already kind of mentioned there's a ton of way to attack these things. We've seen attacks through the SIM card itself. SIM cards actually will run JavaScript. There's been a Black Hat talk about that in the past. Karsten Knoll, I believe. Near-field communication tags, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, GPS, power cables. There's been a lot of debate about, does the power cable thing actually happen in the wild, or is it just something that people do at conferences like this? But it is absolutely more than in theory possible. It is proof of concept and shown that, we know that we can transfer data over a power cable. I have heard stories of people's air gap networks being compromised via somebody plugging in a compromised phone with a power cable. But, again, there's always debate. I see it online all the time that, nobody really actually puts out a malicious power cable, but they absolutely could. And of course, the cellular network, I gave the example of, pushing us back to 2G and putting you on a nasty cell network. Of course, the fact that, at least in my country, the NSA is sitting on our cell towers listening anyway, kind of means we don't really need to hack anybody, does it? Alright, that one didn't land. Alright, but that's just talking about the device. With every device that enters your organization, you get a whole ecosystem of things. It has its official app stores. It might have some third-party app stores that it brings into the table. It has, as with everything else, open source dependencies, vulnerable libraries. I tell people when I'm teaching them exploit dev or reverse engineering, nobody, when they start building code, nobody's gonna start and figure out how to do input output or math or anything like that. They're gonna import libraries. That stuff's already been built for you. That's absolutely gonna happen here too. And there are gonna be vulnerabilities in some of those libraries. You're gonna forget you used them. It's gonna be coming out CVE 2026 6969. That's probably already been assigned, but you're not going to realize that a bunch of the devices in your organization actually have that as part of their ecosystem. They've got a bunch of servers out there that they talk to for things like updates, for things like getting app updates or new apps, or integrations with, say, the cloud back ends for the various devices. Those are just computers out there. They fall for the 3 Ps too. Phishing, passwords, and patches. Things that we tend to do badly. We forget to patch, we use bad passwords, and people fall for phishing. If I am the update server for your iPhone, and I am, as far as your phone is concerned, God, whatever I push, you will install, and I fall for a phishing attack, and somebody else gets access to that server and pushes out an update that includes a backdoor, your phone will gladly take it, because of course it's signed with the right keys. It came from the right server. But again, it's just a box out there that may have some security concerns, which again, we as that enterprise know nothing about. We cannot pen test. We cannot know anything about the security of that particular box or the security awareness posture of the person running it. Told you I'd go over. Social engineering. I mentioned this already as well. We haven't even figured it out about email, and mobility has brought so much more to the table. I'm sure you have all gotten tons of text messages that are phishes. Any way they can send you a link. QR codes, we talked about, near-field communication, social media, either the posts themselves or direct messages. If they can get you to click on something, it's a good way to phish people. One I see happening a lot is the WhatsApps, the Signals, the ones where people think this is a secure application, so it has security, right? It's taking care of that. But if I get a link in WhatsApp and I click on it, it doesn't open in magic WhatsApp security. It opens in my mobile browser. So suddenly whatever security there was is gone. So I see attackers using that a lot and seeing it work well because the mindset is there. It's like, I downloaded this app because it told me it was secure, so it takes care of security, but if I get phished on it, it looks like any other kind of phish. Mobile vulnerabilities happen. This is just graphs showing that there are, in fact, lots of different mobile vulnerabilities happening, at the kernel level, at the application level, at the firmware level, at any kind of level you want to think of. But that is true of anything. Any device that does anything useful at this point, we have not solved security. Microsoft has Patch Tuesday every month. It puts out security bulletins. They have a lot of people trying to solve security problems at places like Google and Microsoft and whatnot. Some of our greatest minds are working on these things, and yet security vulnerabilities continue to happen. That will continue to be the case with mobility for, as long as we live, probably. This is just kind of an example of, if we can say get access to the firmware level or the underlying operating system of the device. I mentioned, our multi-factor authentication apps are sitting up there at the application layer. I actually demoed this at RSA a few years ago, for somebody who was trying to sell an app for two-factor, oddly enough, because security is business. But yeah, if we can get access to the lower level, we can then start pulling these multi-factor codes, or likewise anything else that happens to be on the device, because I'm running out of time. We'll just, get rid of this. But basically, attacks happen and attackers start using them. It very quickly gets from an attacker or a researcher found something to mass exploitation is going on and people are not patching their devices. Another example, we go from SMS phish, we get access to the authenticator. That gets us into Microsoft 365 or Google if that's your thing of choice. And then suddenly you get access to anything anybody's doing in Teams, any files they have on SharePoint, and any other corporate data that they may have just by getting access to that phone, because that phone has direct access to it. But, your impact there, to show, we can steal data off the device, we can remotely control the device, I could tweet on your behalf if I was on your phone, for example. I could record. If you're in a super secret meeting, I could record you. We could privilege escalate if I get a malicious app on your device. Again, I'm at the application layer, but I can try to go down and get additional privileges. But my favorite is pivoting, which I've already kind of mentioned, moving from the mobile device to other devices. Which again, depending on how your network is segmented, it may be that I could move onto every other device on your network and get access to everything. Domain admin and all of it falls to me. I can put Metasploit on a phone and have it start throwing stuff. It's not hard. It speaks TCP/IP. Current mitigation. We have mobile threat defense. We have mobile application management, so we can decide what apps we can have on our phones in our enterprise or not, which, I mentioned is kind of hard to programmatically tell what is malicious and what is not. We've done a lot of good things in terms of being able to catch attacks as they're happening and throw people off our corporate network. We can throw people off the corporate network if they don't meet our policies. But we certainly have, I think, a lot more work to do around what we've built so far. So what we actually need to do more of is get more visibility. Again, the visibility is hard because they make it hard with things like application sandboxing and whatnot. They do give us more APIs. If you're in the space of mobile security, there are hidden APIs that Google or Apple will give you to give you more visibility into things you can monitor going into the device, enforcing things like patching, reducing your attack surface, protecting your privileged users, validation, testing your application, finding out, what is actually malicious and what is not, and not just programmatically, because those rules are really hard. And assuming, the biggest one is assuming compromise. When a mobile device, you really have to look at it from a zero trust perspective. When a mobile device enters your enterprise in some way, assume that there is perhaps a malicious app on it. Presume that maybe someone phished it and they have like root level access to it constantly, and plan for that possibility. Give that app access to what it needs for that, or give that phone access to what the user needs to do their work and no more. But assume that there is the possibility that there is a compromised mobile device in your organization at all times. And I have a lovely quote for us to finish with. Security is not just about protecting devices, it's about protecting people, data, and the business. Which, this attack service is just getting worse. You know, we've got smart watches, vehicles, AI assistants. I love the AR, VR glasses. I exercise on them and meditate. Fitness trackers, smart homes. This ecosystem is just getting worse in terms of things that we're going to have to secure. And that is all I have to say today. I am basically Georgia Weidman on every platform you will find. That is an email address for me. I would love to hear from you. Thank you guys for having me here in Leeds. I'm glad I was able to make it after all, because for a minute there it looked like I might not. But thank you guys for coming, and I hope this made you think about mobility a little different and how you might want to treat it in your enterprise when you go back to work on Monday. You guys work Monday through Friday here, right? You never know.